So today I sat down, and actually within the last about week or so, I started to watch commentary on the school shootings that took place in the Arlington, Mansfield area. Now, me being a resident of North Texas at the current time, I know this area very well. It's a part of the mid-cities. The mid-cities are all the towns in between the city of Dallas and Fort Worth. Half of them are Dallas suburbs, and the other half are Fort Worth suburbs. To understand the demographic between how close Dallas and Fort Worth are, they're approximately about 25 minutes apart. When you're touching county line to county line. It's a rare anomaly to see two large cities connected and abridged by these affluent suburbs. Now, in order to understand the context of what Charlie White and Hassan Poppy Campbell was talking about, you have to understand the demographic of the area. The mid-cities is a very affluent neighborhood. In the early 90s, my mother transferred her job at General Motors in the Burbank plant in which I grew up and lived in South Central Los Angeles. I was a senior in high school, 1994-95. She packed up our shit and we moved to North Texas because her job at General Motors gave her better opportunity in the South than on the West Coast. I wasn't really feeling the area much when I came here, so after my first semester at Trinity High School, I decided to head back to Cali so I could graduate with my partners and friends. But what I took away from this area when I went back home was that all of the prerequisites in the 90s that was said about the South in a place like Texas was that it was a racist place to be and they didn't really like niggas, so forth and so on. As I got to live here, I realized that that wasn't true at all. And there was just as much, if not more, mixing of the cultures and less boundary lines. Now go figure, in the early 90s, Fort Worth was called Murder Worth. It was known as the murder capital of the United States for a short stint. That name still sticks with Fort Worth to this day, based on its history. There's a lot of historic monuments and topography here in North Texas, but actually all around the entire state. Now I know that a lot of y'all have been paying attention to Charlie White and his antics and his disrespect of the West Coast. But that's not what this segment is about. This segment is about the spread of propaganda without proper context, which leads to a fuzzy, blurred line story with no complexity. So let's dig into this complex story. So as I said before, complex, right? Let's talk about the mid-cities and then let's indulge into the history of Arlington. Now, the mid-cities in Arlington are uniquely connected to a small city called Euless. You have one straightaway called Industrial, which leads all the way from the city of Euless down past the new Cowboy Stadium, on all the way to 20, near the Parks Mall. Within this demographic, you also have a small little town in the city of Arlington called Pantego. Now, anybody that's from out of state that ever been through Arlington has heard one story. Don't go through Pantego. Pantego is a very affluent and rich bourgeois community. They don't like niggas frequenting through their city. They pull anybody over who they don't recognize or notice. So within that context, there are small pockets in the DFW Metroplex of towns like that, and towns like White Settlement. And you can feel the racism just by the name. However, even these areas, since the 90s, have been assimilated a lot more than they were in 1994 and 1995. So a lot of police officers that work in these districts are starting to see a lot of people that they didn't see before. That creates a lot of angst. But our problem here has zero to do with racism and more to do with classism. There are black communities in North Texas in which they are just as affluent as any Anglo communities, as any Hispanic communities. And in North Texas, just like in California, Hispanics have large small business industry. There's taquerias and car dealerships and laundromats and a whole plethora of different small communications companies, so forth and so on, that are Hispanic owned. I mean, that's only fitting considering that Texas once upon a time was Mexico. So you do have these mixtures of affluency and poverty literally right next door to each other. Literally. So in Los Angeles, when you have gangs, they're always segregated and separated in their community, in their neighborhood, and you know exactly where you are at all times. But in North Texas, when gangbanging hit this area, it hit certain people, and those people, not being confined to one neighborhood or the other, were able to pick and choose what hood they wanted to be from, depending on what California native came out here and introduced that lifestyle out here. I mean, none can deny that Crips and Bloods come from California. So, as the story is told, bad influence only recognizes bad influence. Now, when you're talking about the mid-cities, there's always been Crips and Bloods in the mid-cities, especially in Arlington, for whatever reason. You have a large Hoover faction in Arlington. And you have a large Blood faction in Arlington as well. But it seems that, gang members always going to meet each other and handle their business. But when it moves into affluent neighborhoods, it causes the mixture of oil and water. Now, this oil and water that I'm talking about creates a slick slippery atmosphere. Kind of like a popcorn machine with too much butter in it. The seeds of destruction are going to slide over into the area and territories of the nice, fluffy, bustling popcorn. You ever go and order some popcorn that has too many seeds in it? That's not seeds, those are kernels that didn't get popped. Kernels that didn't get popped. Popped is a funny word because when used in criminal circles, it's talked about as though a person was arrested. Oh, he was popped yesterday. But then it can double as to someone who was shot. Oh, they popped that nigga. So, pop, being an assimilated word of the word father, lets you know what's blanketing the mind of these youngsters and raising them. Pop. Pop music. Pop shots. Pop by the police. Lack of pops. It goes on and on. That word seems to be aimed in all directions. Except for in this story. This story deals with a young man who's 18 years old, whose mother and stepfather are very affluent. They live in the rich community near Pantego. And for the most part, Mansfield, you got to have money to live there in the first place because most of it is land in new development. New development means newer homes that cost a lot more than the older homes do. We know people that live in those areas with 2 and 3 acre properties. Go figure that. A lot of money in North Texas where they can just drop $1 billion stadium in the middle of the hood like nothing. And Arlington does have that demographic of hood and affluency mixed. And it's very, very open territory for gang members and the future blue-collared of America at the same time. You also have a very prestigious college right in the middle of the area, UTA, where you're getting a whole lot of kids that come from all over the country, from different walks of life, bringing their influence into the concentration of a small city like Arlington, Texas. I know people that are in my close circle whose children went to school in the Arlington School District. And in the last 10 years, Arlington has seen a triple rise in crime and homicides. Within the last 2 weeks, a friend of mine was killed by the police in Arlington. And this school shooting also took place. Now, the kid that you're staring at, this kid is a very affluent kid, as I was speaking on. This kid grew up in a home with everything. But the picture that they showed of him, what does his hair look like? There's dreads in his hair. And I'm going to do a commentary on dreads later. But dreads lock in a lot of energy. Another picture I saw of the kid, he has a gold grill in his mouth. So he's trying to assimilate himself and look like the kids that come from the other side of the tracks, but he's not one of those kids. You know, we call that LA, we call that perpetrating. That's what we call it. We call it perpetrating. Think about it. Back in the day when everybody had a beeper and you wanted a beeper, if you found even a shell of one. Even if it didn't work, or if you borrowed somebody else, we would call that perpetrating. My nigga ain't got no beaver in it, perpetrating. That nigga ain't no baller in it, perpetrating. That nigga ain't no gang member. That nigga's perpetrating. And perpetrators gonna get called out on their shit. So Mr. Charlie White, wow, you want to look into all of the good aspects of this young man's life? Let's talk about his influence, which would be directly his affluent parents. It was told that y'all had made several police reports, the parents of this young man, and that their son had been suffering bullying all through high school ever since y'all took him out of Catholic school and put him into public school. Now, as the story goes, a 15-year-old kid who used to go to this school, who no longer goes to the school, came up to the school and whooped this 18-year-old boy's ass in class. And there's footage online of it. It is very graphic in nature, so if you decide to go watch it, I won't be posting it here because that's not what this is about. I'm not going to be posting two youths fighting each other in high school. That's foolish shit. However, it is online, and if you look it up, you can watch it. This kid walks in the class, 15-year-old kid class, and say something about blood, this and that, and this and that, and whoop this kid's ass. I mean, suplexed him, all kind of shit, and the teacher's screaming, and no other teachers coming to the class to help. The other students is pulling out their cell phones immediately and watching the shit instead of trying to intervene. And that's what type of era we're in. We're in a coward era where people will literally watch some shit going on in a classroom, and instead of reporting it or going about their business, they'll pull out their cell phone and record this crime happening. And to me, that's some bitch shit. I say, oh, they're kids, they shouldn't be recording. But adults do the same goddamn thing. So the culture of what adults are doing is trickling down like small little balls of fecal matter into the youth. And that has to be spoken about. So anyways, this kid gets his ass whipped in class. And after he gets his ass whipped, he runs to his backpack, pulls out a gun, and shoots the other kid right there in the class. The teacher, who was pregnant, as I'm told, shot as well. Now, there's two parts to this story in which I have to weigh what is going on properly. The first part is, what is an 18-year-old kid doing bringing a gun to school in an affluent neighborhood, coming from an affluent family, whose family said that they reported him being bullied several times to the police and nothing was done? Why wouldn't y'all pull him out of this school? Second part to the story is, what would aggravate another kid enough, only 15 years old, to come up to the school and to specifically target this kid? Could it be perpetration? Could it be trying to assimilate and look like something he is not? Because in my book, an 18-year-old is an adult. He might not have had much practice at being an adult, maybe only a year of it. And whether he's a senior in high school or not is irrelevant. Because in the state of Texas, the age of 17, you can be put in county jail. But the other kid didn't go into class and bring a weapon. They didn't jump him. They ain't do nothing to this kid. It was a one-on-one fight. There's reports that allegedly this kid had been jumped by another group of kids and sent home naked and all kinds of other bullying. But once again, what responsibility do the parents have? And if they scared, get your kid out of school and put him in another school. Or get him some karate classes or some boxing classes or something. And now, so Charlie White, this is his excuse. He's saying once he would have fought the kid, and if he would have beat the kid's ass, there's other kids screaming blood, which means that the other kid had a gang behind him. And so fucking what, Charlie White? Other kids have survived. Other children have survived, my man. One day maybe I'll tell you my story. But you see, balls are something that can't be given. They've got to be earned. Kid had enough balls to pull out a gun and shoot somebody. Why he didn't have enough balls to take that ass whooping? Remember, he's 18. The other kid was 15. You got two fat donut eating cops who are supposed to be police security on campus who were lollygagging on a whole nother floor and didn't even know what was going on or what was taking place, as the kid had enough time to go get a gun after getting his ass whooped and being suplexed and shooting people. Think about that. This story is complex, and I don't want to harp too deeply on a young man who virtually just threw his life away based on being a coward. And if he thinks there's any guns in jail, he's sadly mistaken. There's none. Some people will say, well, he's mentally ill. No, he's not. No, he's not. He was smart enough to take out that gun and use it. Some people say, well, because he was an affluent kid, he was being picked on, maybe the bullying got to him. And so fucking what? That's what builds character. Like I said, I have close friends in my personal circle whose kids went to the Arlington school district, and why didn't any of those situations happen to them? They're not gang members. Maybe it's because they had good parents. So, at the end of the day, there's a whole lot of people complicit in what happened, and we need to stop pointing the finger at the 15-year-old, because that sounds absolutely retarded in nature. See, at 15, they don't have enough wisdom or knowledge to think about the consequences of going up to the school and fighting another kid. They might just do it based on other events. And until we hear the whole testimony of what happened and why these kids even had beef in the first place, it's hard to really draw any kind of conclusions. So do us a favor. Keep your personal opinion to yourself if you do not know about this area, Mr. Poppy Campbell. Although I do appreciate your commentary, and you have a lot of positive things to say, shut the fuck up on this one and let grown folks talk about it. And Charlie White, well, I might be your worst nightmare, brother. Because a lot of shit that you say is false as fuck. And you see all of your community activism that you like to brag on yourself about, Mr. Police Officer. You ain't no better for our community than these gangs.